Today on the Therapy Dogs Australia podcast, Sam chats with the wonderful Amy Biggs-Tsoubos. Amy is a generally registered psychologist who works alongside her two superstar therapy dogs, Harvey and Lola. In this episode, Sam and Amy dive into what their therapy dogs do in sessions with their clients and the unique and special ways in which they help others. This is a good one, so take a breath, settle in, and enjoy the podcast.
So today we have with us the wonderful Miss Amy, who is Amy Biggs-Tsoubos. She is a generally registered psychologist. She works at a school and works with her two beautiful therapy dogs, Harvey and Lola. Amy has worked for me for a long time, a very long time. And she was at my private practice, for like 6 years or something like that, and has recently moved on and is getting into schools and doing that kind of fun stuff. But she also helps us out, and has for a long time, helps us out at Therapy Dogs Australia with some handler training and professional development workshopping and things like that. Don't you, Amy?
I do, yes. I've been with Paul for a long time and with TDA for quite a long time. So I've always pop back up every now and then, and people seem to recognize my face sometimes. So
Excellent. So your experience is broadening even more now that you're in schools and things like that. So what we're going to chat about today is one of the topics that everybody is interested in, which is, or a lot of people that contact us are interested in, which is, so what do the dogs do? Like, what do they do? What's the point of the dogs? It's a question we get asked all the time. And we do address that. We do interventions training in our courses, we have a version of it in our community course, but in our clinical course, we spend a fair bit of time on it. But we're going to talk to Amy today about some of the things and activities and stuff that we've come across in our time. So, Amy, how long have you been animal-assisted therapying?
So I originally started the Therapy Dog Australia training in 2016. And that was quite a long time ago. I actually did your inaugural course, the first one that you guys ever ran. And at the time I was using my mum's dog, Lulu, who is a little cavoodle. And I wasn't even a prov psych then. I was still a student at uni in my third year of psychology. And I signed up. I'd met you, Sam, and was doing a little bit of admin stuff at PAW, and thought it would be really cool to be able to take Lulu in and start that journey, knowing I was going to be doing my supervised practice pathway shortly that year after. So I did the course with my mum's dog, and then since then I no longer use my mum's dog, because after a couple of years I was able to get Harvey, my golden retriever, who is now 4. And he and I then did the training together after he was 12 months old, did some of that training together, and then I added in a second dog, as we all know you need when you're working full time in this industry. So then I got Lola as my other therapy dog. So what's that? Is that like 6 years now then? Yeah, most of my time being a psychologist has been as an animal assisted therapist. So throughout my provisional stuff.
Were we co-facilitating kids groups back then?
Yeah, way back when I was a third year uni student, I bullied Sam into letting me come and sit in on some of her kids groups that she ran. And so, yeah, we were doing some of that, and I was able, after I did that training with Lulu, I was able to bring Lulu into those groups as well.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. I'm like, yeah, casting my mind right back. So we have done with the dogs, so private practice, mostly kids and teens, some young adults, a range of presentations, but a lot of neurodivergent population. So a lot of ASD, ADHD as well, particularly when we moved into like the NDIS, when that come about as well. We probably saw quite a bit of our caseload becoming ASD and ASD plus. So kids groups, we've facilitated kids groups with the dogs before as well. I know that we've been into school. So you and I went into schools and ran groups in schools as well.
We did, yes.
We've done, remember that assembly that we went to, that school assembly?
We did. We were presenting on, was it Are You
It was Are You
Okay or
Okay
Mental
Day.
Health
Yeah.
Awareness? There you go. And we went into the local school and we took your dogs, Oliver and Sunny, and
Yeah.
they had a ball in
Yeah.
the
I
assembly.
just let them run around the assembly hall. They loved it.
You did.
It was great.
Yeah. Everyone loved
It
it.
was fantastic. So, we did all that. Now you're in a school, working in a school. So what's your role in the school now?
So my official role is college psychologist. So I'm in an independent school in Brisbane, and I'm working. I do 3 days in their primary school, so Peter year six, and then 2 days in their secondary school, year 7 to 12. So my job, I'm the only psychologist working down in the primary school, and then I job share up in the secondary school with another one of my colleagues, which is great. So my job is very broad. I do lots of fun and exciting things. I run individual kind of counselling sessions. We just do short-term intervention before if we need to refer out to other psychologists. I do kids groups down in the primary school, and we also do wellness groups up in the secondary school. I do professional development for the teaching staff. Um, we've put together like a resources page of things that helpful resources for families. I do interventions in the classroom, go into classrooms, mostly down in the primary school, and do whole grade workshops of various things that are coming up for that grade or that year level. So do lots of observations, lots of just being with people. I get to go on school camps, which has been really
Oh,
exciting, and got to know.
what?
Yeah, I know. I went to Tangalooma. It was like a holiday recently. It's like a 4 day holiday.
With what grade?
Year
Oh,
six.
that would have been
That
awesome.
was It was fantastic. Couldn't take the dogs,
That
unfortunately,
sucks.
um,
That's a fun
but yeah, no,
age.
yeah, no, it was really good.
Oh, that's
So
fun. I want to
yeah,
come and
I had
work at the
lots of
school.
meetings.
I want
Yep,
to come and
no,
go on the
it's
school
great.
camps.
It's really fun, really good.
I want to
Yep,
go on a school Brumby camp. Do they have those?
I don't think they have those.
Okay, I'm gonna have to resign.
You could start one, start a
Yes.
school. It's a Brumby camp.
Okay. So you do everything. So that's cool. Are you busy?
I'm very busy, very busy. If my school could get a couple more psychologists, that would be
It
fantastic.
sounds like flippin'
Um,
awesome
but it's
initiatives though.
fantastic.
Sorry, I was talking over you.
Yeah, yeah, no. A lot of that stuff we've introduced this year. Me and my colleague have been very fortunate to have a lot of support from the school in developing their mental health space and the psychology space. So they've really given us a lot of resources, and we've been able to grow it a lot more this year than what it was, which is great.
So the dogs weren't in there straight away. So like you started this job part-time last year, and I remember that the dogs weren't in there straight away. So what happened there?
So when I first applied for that job,
And I
I
gave
let
you
them
a
know that I was
fantastic reference.
You did, yes. It was just a 3 day a week in the primary school, and at the time they were interested in the dogs and wanting to know more about how that could work at the school because they hadn't had a therapy dog at the school before. But then we kind of just decided to start off with, given it was my first time in the school as well, and it was part time, that we'd just do a bit of a soft entry and then put it on the table for 2022. So that rolled around. I was lucky I was still working at Paw at that time, so I still was working with therapy dogs. And that was actually a really big jump. Working in a school setting was entirely different, but not having the dogs as well was also really, really different. Because I'd never not worked with a dog before.
I remember that you came to work at Paw and forgot your dog because
I did. One of my least favorite times to remember. It was because I'd gotten in the habit of some days I had to like drive to this location with a dog and some days to this location without a dog. And I just got in the car. I'd like moved house and I got in the car and I'd got all the way to the car park at Redcliffe and I was like, oh my goodness, I have forgotten my dog at home. How have I done this?
Nala was like, where's Lola?
Yeah. Lola was at home.
I just went camping yesterday, like just the last night. And I stopped at Kenilworth to go to the shop. And as I got out of the car, I was like, where's the dog? And then I was like, oh no, I didn't bring a dog because there's no dogs allowed at this campsite. But it's that autumn, like I'm so used to having a dog in the car. It just is this funny feeling like when I'm not constantly like, where's the dog? You hear those horrible stories of people accidentally leaving dogs. There's been a couple of guide dogs and stuff that have been left in cars and they unfortunately do not survive that. That's like a thing for me that I'm like very aware that I'm not accidentally leaving a dog somewhere. But it's funny how you get that like automatic thing, but it can go one way or the other.
Yeah, I think I was just juggling a lot at that time and we just moved house and I just
your routine's
didn't know
out.
what it was and where I was going.
Yeah.
But the dogs are also so quiet in the car. Like as soon as I pop them in the car, because they've been used to doing it since they were little. So they just, as soon as you put them in the car, they're in the back and they're just asleep. That I didn't even notice. They don't pop their heads up often or anything. So
I can't remember what I was doing the other day. This is like 2 weeks ago. I can't remember what I was doing in the morning, but I forgot Oliver. Like I walked out to the car and was like, where's the dog? Like I had to go back and like back out to the patio and be like, Oliver, it's Wednesday. I was like, I can't remember. When my routine gets mixed up, I do that as well. Like, where's the dog?
Yeah.
Have I got a dog? Is this the right dog? So what Amy's mentioning there is that when we work full time, so if you're going to do like 5 days a week, or even if you're doing more than 3 days a week of animal assisted therapy stuff, particularly in a school setting, somewhere that's like a high workload for the dog, you're going to need more than one dog. So we don't work dogs 5 days a week and we try not to work them consecutive days as well. That's a very good way to burn your dog out. They need a lot of rest mentally and physically. So that's why she's talking about like we all get multiple dogs and then you have to like prepare for them to retire and things like that as well, or you need to drop down to part-time animal assisted stuff. So I've got clinicians that work for me now that they work full-time for me, but their dog works part-time, if that makes sense. Okay, so how have the dogs settled into the school? You're taking both in, hey?
Yeah, so we started off, they really did like a slow transition in. Again, because it was new for everyone, there was a lot of paperwork side of things that we had to do, like risk management and informing all the parents, all the children, getting consent. Like it was a really big process to just, it's not just taking a dog into the school.
It is not.
And I really had to guide and educate and scaffold that for the school, the leaders of the school, because they weren't sure. They were really happy to have a dog in the school and therapy dog, and they were all keen for it. But I really had to guide them through that process of what that looked like practically and ethically for everyone. So Harvey started off 1 day a week in the first term, and then we've just built it up from there. So there was like a set day that he would come in, and that worked with my diary, and I planned to have him there on that day. And all the staff knew that he was going to be there on that day. And then so now we've gradually built up. We're coming into term 4 now in the next couple of weeks, but they pretty much come, they alternate now most of the days. So it also depends, working in a school, you're not always sure what your diary is going to look like. And sometimes there are days which are more appropriate to have the dogs than others. So I do make a decision based on what my day looks like as to whether I'm going to bring them in.
Yeah.
So Lola works, and Lola only also works in the high school, and Harvey works in the primary school. And I've done that deliberately based on the dog's temperaments and what I know that they would feel comfortable with. So Lola is more like both totally great therapy dogs, but can be a little bit more timid. And I know that going into a school of 300 primary school kids would overwhelm her quite a lot, especially because the kids, we walk through the middle of the school and there's just floods of kids around us and they are working on keeping their calm. So I don't take Lola into that environment purely just because I know that would be overwhelming. But she loves the high school. She loves the kids that goes into the big groups of kids, but they're a little bit more settled because they're a bit older. So she's there 2 days a week, or sometimes one day a week, depending on what my diary looks like. And then Harvey's just super robust. We can walk into the early years playground and there's 100 kids that are between the prep to year 2, and he's pretty chill. He just is happy walking along, getting pats and visiting everyone and doing laps around the playground. So
he's a bit bigger than Lola too.
Yeah, his size is a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would probably say that Lola's probably more excitable as well.
Nowadays, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
She's also like a year and a bit younger.
Yeah.
Harvey's
She's
4
3
now, so he's getting up. Yeah, she just turned 3. Yeah.
Yeah, because Nala's nearly 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool that you've had the opportunity to do that. I know lots of people wouldn't be in a situation where they can navigate that so well. Like they don't have necessarily, both campuses or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that's flipping awesome. And it's really setting both dogs up for success. And Harvey is, I can just see him in that environment. Like he'd just love that. Like just be so happy with that. But it's very cool that you're able to, see that for Lola and make sure that she's having good experiences and she's in that situation where, because the older kids, it's so different. Even like from primary school to a high school, the high school kids, they're still noisy and they still crowd, but they've got impulse control and they've got better impulse control and better force regulation and things like that. And they're less, like they're not running. Like high schoolers aren't like running around. Like primary school, like kids, I don't know if they can walk, but they just seem to run everywhere. So it's a real vibe. So, and much more difficult for them to regulate and follow directions and things like that as well. So if anyone's working with a dog and they're not, like a primary school environment takes a really special, specific sort of dog. And if your dog's not ready for that and you've got any doubt in your mind, don't take them don't take them. Because those situations, we actually talked about this in our last podcast, but those situations are pretty much impossible to control in terms of controlling the kids. So, once the kids dysregulate and, get excited and things like that, you can ask them and give them directions and things like that. But ultimately you can't control that situation. If it's going to be chaos, it's going to be chaos. So the only management strategies in that scenario really are to remove the dog, which is not what we want therapy dogs in schools to be about. We don't want it to be that dogs that can't handle situations, those situations are being put in there and then having to be removed. And then, their association with the kids is that they're getting in trouble whenever the dog's around. That's not going to be beneficial for human-animal bond.
And I guess that's part of being an experienced but also knowledgeable animal assisted therapist, is being able to recognize the environment that suits your dog and making sure that you can facilitate that as best you can. Like I know that Lola would be fine in the primary school. She wouldn't do anything that would make me feel like it was unsafe or anything, but I also know it's not in her best interest at the moment. She just would be a little bit overwhelmed by that situation. So Mm.
Yeah, and we want long careers for the dogs, like there's a lot of time and money invested in the dogs, and we want them to have a long, happy, healthy career into retirement. So she might be in the high school forever, or she might be in the high school for a year or two, and then she might mature. She's only 3. She might
Yeah.
mature and become more interested in the kids, or more robust in that environment, or whatever it is. Or she might not, and she might just be a high school dog. She was never really overwhelmed by kids in private practice. She was always pretty down to play.
Yeah, and I think part of it's just the volume of kids.
Yeah.
Like one on one with little people, she's fantastic, and in like a small group environment, she'd be fine. But it's the transit between places, and it's the noisy, busy
Yeah.
times, and so it's just about managing that a little bit.
That's why we assess our dogs and our dog and handler teams on a case by case basis, and we assess them for the environment that they're going into. So when we assess a dog and handler team, if they've told us they're going into a school, we assess the dog for going into a school. Is this dog suitable to go into a school, a primary school, high school, whichever it is? If someone brings me a dog that's going into private practice, I assess the dog as going into private practice. They don't need to be the same level of dog. And just because, this dog might not be suitable. So like if we looked at Lola and said, oh, okay, she's probably not suitable for primary school, that doesn't mean she's not suitable as a therapy dog. She's a great therapy dog in various situations. That we don't need her to be able to be in she doesn't have to be able to be everywhere. And if we've assessed a team for private practice, we've stipulated that on their paperwork. So if they then want to change their role, they need to come back and temperament test with us again, so that we can have another look at the dog and assess them for that situation. And the reason for that is so that we can, acknowledge that each dog and handler team is different and they have a different role. And we don't want all dogs to have to be at this like standard or, specific skill set to suit the blanket kind of, what everything that's available for a therapy dog job. We don't want that, because that's just going to mean that like heaps of dogs miss out, like we've got heaps of dogs that work in private practice that would never cope in a school. They would not enjoy that. But they don't need to. So that doesn't mean they can't be private practice dogs. We want to see those dog and handler teams doing their job, Okay, so what do the dogs do? I keep wriggling around and I'm like kicking my desk and everything.
That's my least favorite question because it's the hardest to answer, but
so
it's the
hard
one
to
I get
answer.
asked all the time.
Yeah.
What do the dogs actually do? If I gave you some examples of what we would do on a day-to-day type of basis, let's go with that. So, um, I was in the year 3 classroom a couple of weeks ago, and that particular class was having a little bit of trouble with regulating um, some of their emotions. They were a little bit
Big feelings?
just big feelings, big energy,
Woo!
just out of just living their best lives, just not appropriate for the classroom environment. So I organised with the teacher that the kids had heard about the zones of regulation before. It's something that was already implemented in the primary school, but not overly used heaps. So
Do they do it the
we
same
wanted
way
to do
we
a
do
little
it?
bit of a refresher. Similar, very similar. Yeah, yeah. Where you've got like that blue zone, green zone, yellow zone, red zone. They were using all those
Yeah, some
zones.
schools have a different
Um,
system, and so when I do zones with my kids, they're like, "These colours are wrong," and I'm like, "Uh oh."
yeah, I've seen sometimes that the blue zone doesn't get included, and it just goes from like feeling okay to feeling not okay to feeling definitely not
Yeah,
okay or out of control. But where they miss that kind of low feeling, which is really important when our energy's low.
yeah,
That's still different to being
yeah.
okay. Um, but I was able to organise with the classroom teacher to go in and do like a small session on our zones of regulation, but using Harvey in that classroom, which obviously the kids' engagement and attention, and they were loving it. They were so happy to have Harvey in the classroom for a visit, and their engagement with the content was really good. For a bunch of grade threes who was the middle of the day, we're getting towards the end of the term, they were already a little bit all over the place. They were really, really able to engage with that. So we started off by everyone got their wriggles out a little bit, because Harvey coming into the class is a pretty exciting moment. So we had a bit of time to have a bit of a pat and a chat generally, and then we talked about some of that content, and we looked at how Harvey was feeling when he came into the classroom and what zone he might have been in and what zone that they might have been in, and then used that kind of less structured 5-10 minutes that we had at the start to use that as our springboard to getting into our content, which was about regulating our energy. So we, drew up on the board some of those different zones, and they all knew a little bit about what it was. And I'd printed out some pictures of Harvey and lots of different zones that I take while we're out and about doing things. And then the kids were coming up and putting those pictures on the board about what zone they thought Harvey was in at that time. And then we just had a bit of a whole class discussion about what makes Harvey go into certain zones and what's he doing, and then how does that mirror some of the activities that they also do, and the answers that we were getting, and it was really cool to see, and you can definitely see how doing that with emojis or with little pictures or just talking about that, you would have got some of those kids that start fading off and it's a bit boring now, and when is this going to be done? But for that whole 40-minute session, they were really able to keep engaged with that and motivated and keep coming up with ideas. And then they started to point out, when you're not engaging with Harvey straight away, he kind of reads the room a little bit, and he went and kind of sat down while we were just having a bit of a chat, and the kids are instantly able to say, oh, now he's in the blue zone. So being able to point that in real life was really cool as well. And now I've had some of those kids after that session that we did, when they see Harvey and I walking around, they come up and they're like, oh, he's in the green zone. Actually, I had one of the kids the other day, Harvey, walking past kids playing handball is always a bit of a mission for Harvey, because the ball, he gets really excited about seeing a ball.
That's so cute.
And that's always a moment where we have to be like, oh boy, everything's fine, it's not your ball. But one of the kids pointed out, they were like, Harvey looks like he's in the red zone when he looks at that ball. And I was like, that's exactly right. If we let him go, he would absolutely be in the red zone chasing that net all around. So that was really cool.
Anyone who teaches kids and works with kids would know, like, for them to engage in the content and then process it, comprehend it, retain it, and then recall it later, and then re-engage with you unprompted about the content again. It's a big deal. Like, it's a huge thing that they're able to do that. We Amy and I love zones of regulation, so we do it all the time. And what she's describing is that if you don't know what it is, you can go. It's an actual thing. I can't remember the lady that made it, but
I don't know her name
if
either.
you Google it, she'll come up. But the zones of regulation is about teaching kids about sort of arousal level. So the zones, like blue zone, sometimes, because kids have been taught colors to feelings and stuff, so sometimes they're like, oh, the blue zone's sad. But it's actually not sad. It's low and slow. And then the green zones, it's not necessarily happy, but it's your focused listening and learning zone. So it's the active learning kind of zone. Then we've got yellow zone, which is that excited, silly, wriggly. So you're just up out of the green zone, but you haven't completely lost control. So that can also be the zone where you're starting to feel a little bit of frustration or anxiety. Then we've also got the red zone, which is the out of control zone. So that red zone, it can be out of control. Kids get out of control excited, like they pee their pants, like they do that stuff all the time. And they get it. Oh, we've actually got a couple at the clinic at the moment in groups. They're red zone for play. And, they are having an absolute blast, these little girls. And everyone else around them is just going insane. They're like, holy moly. And it ends in tears, like they accidentally hurt themselves or they hurt each other or whatever, because they're in the red zone for play. So The zones of regulation is a really, really cool thing to teach, and it's just so much easier to teach it with the dog. So the core of what we're doing when we're doing an animal-assisted intervention is we're doing an intervention that already exists. And because Amy and I are psychologists, we're using evidence-based modalities. So that's a CBT type strategy. And we're doing an intervention that we could do without the dog. So it's an evidence-based intervention that exists outside of having a therapy dog present. And then we add the dog in where appropriate to help us to facilitate that intervention. So what Amy's talking about, so when we do this without a dog, you've kind of just got pictures, you got it, you know, like this, there's this thing you can print out and it's got the colors and some feelings, words and stuff like that. You could just print out pictures of whatever you want, or like get emojis or like whatever, and get the kids to put them in the correct zones and stuff like that. But we do it with a dog. So we take photos of our dogs living their lives in the different zones. We've got some really funny red zone pictures of our dogs playing, and they look like they're trying to kill each other. There's like teeth, you know, because they're wrestling. It's really funny. So we've got these pictures and we print them out, and then I would have to say 99% of my kids get this right. And these are kids that are on the spectrum. They can put the dog in the correct zones, and even if they don't get it right the first time, I just get them to place the pictures, and then they talk to me about why they've placed what pictures where. And if they don't get it right the first time, as they're talking it through, they'll move them. And it's like they're being able to externalize and, you know, project that out on the dog. You know, they're visualizing it and the dog. They can't visualize themselves. You know, they're just not up to that yet. You know, that's a fair bit of insight building. And, you know, we're trying to develop that. You know, that's what we're actually working on, is for them to start being aware of themselves. So when we do it with the dogs first, they get to have this cool, like, it's using a visual aid, and it's just more interesting and fun because the dog's in the room. Like, that dog's right here. So that's this dog, and now we've got photos of this dog. And so they've, like what Amy's talking about, that first 5 or 10 minutes of playing with the dog and getting the wrigglies out and things like that, the kids are forming an attachment with the dog at that time too. So they've got now an invested interest in this dog, you know. So now they're doing that. If Amy had just walked in with the dog at heel and put it on a mat and then gone, right, kids, here's some pictures of the dog, you actually get a different outcome to if they get to have that playtime, like less structured playtime, and they get to engage and have, what's that word? There's like really natural initiation and reciprocation stuff happening with the dog. That's where they're building that human-animal bond there, and they're developing that interest. But remember also their cortisol is coming down, and they're having positive emotions happening as well. So all that stuff happening sets you up now for this learning space. And Amy's actually using the zones by letting the kids get into if they've gone into the red zone, then bringing them back down. And we bring them down with the dog. So then we'll go, okay, Harvey, we're ready to do our activity. So I need you in the green zone, please, buddy. You know, like we use the dogs to model. So we're like, okay, Harvey, it's time for you to be, you know, over here. Come on, lie down. That sort of thing. All right, kids on bottoms. You know, we use modeling with the dog to then regulate everybody down. So we've had the dog take care of the wrigglies up here. The kids are having positive emotions and experiences. They transfer that positive experience onto Amy because she brought the dog here. So now we're happy with her. So this is great. She seems cool. All right, the dog's settling down. Time for me to settle down. Oh, okay. Oh, Harvey has zones of regulation, does he? All righto, here he is at the beach. Okay, that's must be the yellow zone. All righty. Okay, here's trying to kill another dog. It looks like that in the photo. So then all that happens. So then the kids are engaged in the activity, and they've got a visual aid, and they're not having to talk about themselves. So they're not having to talk about, you know, when you kids are naughty, yous are in the red zone, you know, like they're not having to do that. And they actually don't like doing that. Kids don't really like doing that. First up initially anyway.
Probably ever, but
Probably ever. So we're certainly much more open to it once we've discussed, because we've normalised and validated too. Amy's doing modelling when she goes like, oh, sometimes Harvey gets in the red zone. You know, she's modelling as well that she's not angry at Harvey and Harvey's not a bad dog and things like that. So it makes it easier for little people and teenagers and adults to know that this is a safe space for us to talk about red zone stuff, because we just talked about red zone stuff with these dogs and, you know, nobody's upset. Everything's cool, man. Like, we're just talking about red zone stuff. It's all good. So when we're doing that as well, the way that we handle that, and make sure that we're not saying like, you know, the dog is bad or, you know, stuff like that. Because we're modeling that how we're going to handle the kids when we have this conversation too, and what it's going to be like for them to be, you know, the center of that. So modeling happening, and that's how you're getting your outcomes. But the point being that you're using a evidence-based CBT style intervention that you would have used without the dog, and then you've included the dog in there. So that's why it's hard to explain, hey?
Yeah, and that's a pretty, I guess, simple example. Like, it might be easy for people to see, like, oh, yep, zones without a dog, yep, zones with a dog. And that was a pre-planned intervention that I walked into that classroom knowing I was
like
going
a
to do. So I
program.
was able to have some planning in the back of my head about how this might look and what we might be doing. And obviously there's things you can't control, all sorts of variables, but for the most part, it went, you know, as planned. I walked out of there having done my goal, that I'd agreed with the teacher that that was what we were doing. And then there's all the incidental stuff that happens with dogs, and which is even trickier to explain, but is I actually find more cool when
Same.
people talk about it, and then you actually say, hey, like, this happened, and because the therapy dog was there, I was able to do this, which maybe if the dog wasn't there, we wouldn't have been able to go down that road. Like, it would have been more structured. So I've got one of my favorite stories of a little person that I work with, and it happened a few months ago, but for me, when I think about it, I'm like, that's what animal assisted therapy is. And it was working with one of the primary school kids. I think she's about 8. And we're working a lot on the social skills stuff, and she does kind of things that she's trying to engage with other people and initiate those um, interactions, but does it in a way that it's not entirely appropriate. So she does things like pulling faces at people, or sticking her tongue out, or she'll go up to people and glare at them,
Should
or
I not be doing
pick up
that?
pens
Is that
and
not a good idea?
wave them. No, that's not appropriate.
Okay.
Well, I mean, go for gold, but for her, it's not having the desired outcomes, because people, instead of finding that funny or amusing, or hey, let's have a chat, they're put off by that
Yeah.
experience, and then it's not what they want. So um, yeah, and then that has a massive flow-on effect for this little girl, as you would expect it would. So we're working a lot on how do we engage with people in a more pro-social way that leads to desired outcomes of friendship. Um, and Harvey was in the room with us at that time, and we were, I can't even remember what we're doing. We're drawing something or writing something down. Um, and Harvey came out of nowhere. He got up from where he was sitting next to her and came and sat on top of the piece of paper that we were writing on. And she immediately went, oh, Harvey, like, you've sat on my piece of paper. And she was quite frustrated in that moment by the fact that out of nowhere he'd got up and come into her space and sat down on that piece of paper. And we were able to take that experience and use that and reflect to her about, we chatted like, well, Harvey's all right, we can ask him to move, but what was he trying to do? And initially she said he was trying to be really annoying. And I was like, was he actually trying to be annoying to you? Is that why you think he did that? And she kind of stopped for a minute and was able to kind of look, well, maybe he just wanted a pat. And I was like, I think that's what he wanted. I think he came and sat down in front of you because you'd stopped patting him when you were next to him, and so you turned your attention, and he'd got up wanting a bit more of a pat. And we were able to work through that. What he wanted was, he was being friendly. He wanted to come along and have a pat and get your attention and engagement. But her initial reaction to his actions was frustration and annoyance that he'd interrupted. And through some careful scaffolding, because you do have to be careful with this particular little girl about how you go about things, we were able to kind of bring that back around to, that's similar to what she does to her friends, is that she does something with all the positive intentions of, I want to be your friend, but she does annoying things like wave a pen in their face, or get in their personal space, or distract them from their work, and then they have that outcome of being frustrated. But she's also got a little bit of internalization around that she's a bit naughty and she's bad. And,
is she getting in trouble
So
for
we're
that
working
stuff with the other kids?
Yeah, she does get in trouble because it's not pro-social behaviors. So she does get in trouble for it. But then she also has a impulse control difficulties where she can't control that a lot of the time. So she's doing it, getting in trouble, and then upset with herself because that's what she's done. But also then multi-layered, doesn't have a lot of understanding about what's an alternative. So there's lots of complexities there. But when we were able to look at, and what you were saying before about like normalizing those behaviors and those experiences, and we're able to say, like, when Harvey's not in trouble, he's not a naughty dog, he's not doing that, hasn't defined him in any way. He's just done something, and we can reteach him how to do something differently. So we just asked Harvey to sit down next to her again, and he was able to get some pats, and she carried on drawing. But that like 5 minutes was just, for me, it stuck in my head as like a really poignant moment of what animal assisted psychology is, and about how that the behavior offered by Harvey in that moment, which I couldn't have predicted or scheduled or provided an intervention for, it just happened and landed in our lap, and I was able to use that towards our goals, which was really, really good. And I actually think it's one of the sessions that she's engaged the most with, and that conversation was that 5 minute of conversation felt really meaningful to her. Like, she got it, whereas all the other stuff that we'd been doing, she'd got and then forgotten about it, where that one I felt like she was really meaningfully engaged in that.
It's amazing how often something like that happens in the room as well. Like, you know, something will just happen that just is so flippin' useful. But I actually think a really big part of that is because you've had so much experience and handler training that we have got a filter over our eyes all the time, that we're ready to, whatever the dog does do, we're ready to go, okay, is this useful for me or is it not? And I think when people are first starting working with the dogs, they get so overwhelmed with the whole situation that they're not ready. And that's why they're finding that so hard. But to those people, I would say this comes with time. It comes with time, but also the dog's got to be right. So I think sometimes people are taking dogs in that aren't quite ready, or they haven't had any training, or they haven't had handler training, or even they have and they've passed. But one thing that we can't always prepare you for is coping with the stress of being a handler, a therapy dog handler, having the dog there, but coping with the stress of your job as well, because we don't really have anything to do with that. So that's kind of the dog and handler teams need to assess for themselves. Are they ready to be in their workplace doing their job and handling a dog at the same time? Because as soon as you become a bit overwhelmed and stressy, you'll actually see that coming out in your dog's behaviors. And the dogs will either disengage from you and sort of shut down a bit because they're like, I don't know what's going on over there, you know, but I'm just, whatever, I'll stay out of it. You seem frazzled, so I'll just leave you be. Or the dogs will become dysregulated themselves as well, and they'll start to offer less predictable behaving, kind of like, what's the dog doing that for? So just keep an eye out for that. So if you're seeing your dog sort of fairly even just avoidant, sort of disengage or shut down-ish, or if you're seeing them dysregulate and stuff like that, have a look at yourself as the handler and see if there's something else going on for you, and are you actually ready for this environment? Because I think that when people contact us and say, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, we do intervention training in the course and we repeat ourselves, millions of times over that you're just going to do your job like you would normally do your job. And then where possible, you're going to start including the dog. I think people get overwhelmed with that, and there's a lot to remember and there's a lot on, and then they don't have the opportunity. Because, we're using quite a lot of creativity when we're looking for those things happening as well, and being aware of our clients' goals and, this evidence-based modality that we're going to be using, and then the dog's offered, whatever. It does take a fair bit of practice, guys, to get pretty good at that. So, don't be too hard on yourselves, but also do be aware that, go at your pace with it too. Like Amy's had a lot of experience working with the dogs, but that would definitely be something that I hear people coming back and saying, is that they just go like, I'm not finding those moments, or the dog is distracting them. Like they're trying to use everything the dog does. So like, we've had dogs before that have been just being silly. But sometimes that might be useful because like, oh my goodness, they're in the red zone or whatever. But sometimes it's not useful. And so then you just need to manage the dog because it's going to detract. It's going to distract the handler. But it's going to also detract from the young person or whoever the participant is reaching their goals as well. How do you feel? Do you feel like it happens? Is it often? And it's hard to think of examples. It's so hard to think of them.
Yeah, it's because it happens day to day, and a lot of the time, like, it took that moment to, like, I was like, oh, that's stuck in my head, where it's stuff that just happens. And it's really interesting because sometimes my colleague will say, or other staff members will come and they'll have seen me do an interaction with a child with the dog and bring Harvey into that moment, and they'll be like, wow, that was really cool, where I haven't registered that as like a pretty cool thing. I'm like, that's just day to day. But other people are like, whoa, you just weaved these two situations together to create this brand new thing, like moment. It's really cool. There are definitely still times, even with a fair bit of experience, that I still miss moments, and I realize afterwards that I'm like, oh, I could have really used that. Harvey offered that, or Lola offered that, and I wasn't there and I didn't register that, but I could have used that. But I think also that reflection's helpful because the next time it comes up, I'll sure catch it, and use it where we can.
And that's like, sometimes that will happen just with anything as well, but I think it's better to have missed an opportunity like that than to have tried to cling on to everything the dog's doing and have missed your actual evidence-based modality and your actual goal.
Yeah.
Because you're stuffing around wondering why what's the dog doing now? That kind of stuff. And people are just confused and like, I don't know, ripping up paper, sleeping. It's far better and a safer option to not worry about involving the dog and what they're doing in that sort of metaphor kind of way. They can still be there and getting pats and stuff. It's much better to ignore bringing the dog into the intervention in that way than it is to ignore the intervention. You can't be doing that.
No.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Super important. Especially being at the school, obviously you've got a huge responsibility there with those kids, but especially also in the private practice environment, and the profession that we're in as well is very regulated. People are paying for a service, and it's not to sit around and pat dogs, So we've got to keep that in mind as well, that people are paying for a service. But also when you're a some professions are different, but when you're a psychologist, you're also got all these rules and things like that for a reason. But yeah, that's why I keep coming back and saying, so if I sound like I'm sort of repeating that, it's because it's actually really important. So working with the dogs versus the days that you don't have the dogs there, do you notice things? Is there times when the dogs are there and it's actually a pain in the bum, or?
Yeah, sometimes, and it's more so like there are certainly students at the school who are fearful of dogs or who don't
Mm.
like dogs or who have allergies to dogs. So I do have to um, plan my days around if I've got one of those students coming in, I don't bring a
Yeah.
dog that day. Um, Purely because I actually don't have anywhere else to put
Yeah.
them. So it's not like I have a spare clinic room next door that I can pop, Harvey or Lola in for half an hour. So it does mean that I have to negotiate my day like that. And some days I'll have, I might have a lot of parent meetings or a lot of staff meetings, or we've got this event or that event, and I might only see one or two kids. And sometimes I don't bring Harvey or Lola in on those days either, because I don't think it's fair to them to bring them to work to engage with people for, an hour and a half, and the rest of the time I'm running around campus in meetings where it's not appropriate to take them, and then they're sitting in my office.
Yeah.
So I do also make sure that I'm planning. I do a lot of planning around when I'm bringing the dog and when I'm not, and when it's good for them to come and when it's not helpful or whatever. Sometimes they can be a little bit of um, it's just an extra layer of complexities when in schools things evolve very quickly. So I can look at my diary, which is very different from practice, where I'm used to looking at a diary that's booked up 2 months in advance and I know who's coming in 4 weeks' time. Whereas schools are very much like you might flick forward to the following week and it's, looking okay. And the next week will be totally empty. But then each day that goes by, it's just like things all of a sudden out of nowhere pop up, like things evolve very quickly. Um, so, and sometimes you do have to just drop what you're doing and go and sort this, be present for that acute crisis that's happening. And so then you're like, well, am I taking the dog? Am I not? Where are they getting put? How long am I going to be gone
Yeah.
for? So there are complexities around that where, for the most part, I'm very lucky. They're very well trained. They can just sit in my office, and if they needed to, they would be happy sitting in the air conditioning for 4 hours if I need them to. It's not ideal, but they can do it, and they're not doing it to disturb
Do
anyone
you have a
else.
crate in there?
Um,
How do you handle
I
that?
don't know. Um, my Harvey just sits in, well, my office when
Just
I need
chills.
him to,
Yeah.
and because he just chills out. Mostly I get in trouble from all the staff who are like, "You've left Harvey in there for so long. He looks so sad," because he's like a gap underneath the window where it's frosted, and then there's a gap, and he sits there and looks out. And all the colleagues are like, "What are you doing, leaving Harvey in there?" I'm like, "I was doing other things," and I get in trouble because I've left him. I get made to feel real guilty about how sad he looks because he puts on these sad puppy eyes. Um, Lola's a bit of look. Lola has a history of chewing things she's not supposed to. She hasn't yet, touch wood, destroyed anything. But I'm also extra careful about how long I'm leaving her alone for.
She chews
Um,
things like it's an Olympic sport and she wants to
yeah,
represent Australia. Like
yeah,
she takes it very seriously and like
yeah.
creates opportunities for herself.
Yeah, the problem is it's not obvious things. Like it's not stuff that you leave out that you're like, oh, I left that out, it's gonna get chewed. It's the things that you don't notice. Um, like the light switch panels is the biggest one
She is a
that she'll
rat
go
bag.
for. Like pulls off the power plug cases and eats them. And like you don't notice that it's gone until you go to plug something in and you're like, oh my God, there's no case on this anymore
She
because Lola ate it
strikes
last
again.
Thursday. Out of control. She's been pretty good recently, actually. I'm hoping as she gets older, it becomes less of an issue. Um, Touch wood, she hasn't eaten anything in the office yet, thank goodness.
Goodness.
But
Thank
I do
goodness.
have to be careful.
So, how do you handle that with the kids? Like, do they have an expectation that they're going to see the dog, and how do you handle that when the dog's not there?
Yeah, to be honest, I've tried not to set that
Yeah,
expectation. So even though there are days that are more like Harvey days or Lola days, I'm very upfront with the kids that I see all the time about sometimes they won't be here. And that's to get me out a little bit of hot water for when they're not
yeah,
there. And you don't have to deal with that disappointment feeling. So I've really set that up to be, it's almost like a bit of a bonus if Harvey or Lola is there, as
yeah. Okay.
opposed to it being a disappointment when they're not there, just because of the nature of schools, that it has to be like that.
So you've done a bit of
Um,
positioning and
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
and preparing the kids for that. So that's great.
Yeah.
Do you have any
Yeah.
transitionary like sort of items and things like that? Like, do you still use photos of the dogs or things like that?
Yeah, I still use photos of the dogs. Not all the time, but definitely I still have quite a stack of them, and I will give them out when I need to. It's sometimes can be tricky because it sometimes causes a little bit of a an issue with other kids when they don't get one.
Yeah,
Um, like if they're children that I don't have any reason to need to see, and
yeah.
then they see their friend walking around with a photo of Harvey or Lola. But no, I do still have them.
You know what you should do is, instead of buying the postcards, get business cards, because you get
Yeah,
250 for like $10. Amy and I use
make them a little
Vistaprint.
bit smaller.
Yeah, and then they're
Hmm.
smaller, and then you can just have them like, yeah, and
Give them out to
yeah,
anyone. Yeah, yeah,
have those
yeah. It would be
kind of
nice.
ones. Amy and I use Vistaprint for printing out. We print out like photos of the dogs, but like with some, you can put, when you use the postcards, you can put information about them on the back. So we put like Harvey enjoys swimming, stuff like that. They're really cool to use as little introduction, getting to know you sort of things. We use them for a bit of stuff, but they're a bit more expensive. So you get 50 postcards for, I don't even remember how much they are, but it might even be like $25 or something.
I think it is. Yeah.
But you can buy business cards in stacks of 250 for like $10 from Vistaprint, and you could just put, as your business, you just put a photo of the dog on the front. You know what I mean? And you could probably write stuff on the back
Yeah.
of those too, just so that they're more, being in a school environment, like you don't want to be handing out hundreds of those postcards.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's a good idea.
what was I going to say? So what about, the staff you mentioned? So like,
Uh,
what are the dog interactions with the staff like at the school?
well, I did a lot of um, positioning with the staff around. I really wanted them to know, sorry, what animal assisted therapy or animal assisted psychology
Because
was before I just
I just
brought.
remembered that they had another dog.
They do. So they have a college dog at the school, Bonnie, and she's with the chaplain, um, and has more of a mascot feel about her. So her role is more of a symbol of pats and things like that. Whereas I really wanted to differentiate that the role that the therapy dogs had working alongside me was very different to that of a college dog. And they both, I spoke about how they both had their, sorry, they both had their benefits and things, but just very different roles. So I sent out, a big email when I first started bringing Harvey into all of the staff, which included like the grounds people and the admin staff, like anyone who we were going to run into who might be like, why is there a dog here? To help explain to them about who Harvey was. And then I said to follow up email about Lola later on, but who the dogs were, what their role is with me. And I wrote some of the, I guess, I anticipated what some of the frequently asked questions might be and answered some of those in there. And then for people who are actually more interested in learning about it, I included like a couple of articles about animal assisted therapy in that email that people could then go and do their own research if they wanted to know more information about it. Um, so I did all of that to start with. I invited staff to let me know if they had fears or allergies to dogs, or there was a reason that they were, a bit worried or uncomfortable, so that we could make it work basically. Because I was very aware that I was at the time, a new staff member coming into the school in a pre-existing environment, and I was doing this new thing that we're bringing in a therapy dog, and I wanted to make sure I got off on the right foot and that people were accepting, but also knowing that I was willing, I'm not going rogue. I'm willing to work with them about how everyone can feel comfortable in the workplace. So I did a lot of that at the start, and I got lots of positive feedback from that. But the staff now are always asking if it's a Harvey day or if it's a Lola day. Up in the high school, Lola is the staff room that we have is a bit more open plan, and then it's just my office. So Lola often finds herself in sitting under the heads of house desks or giving them a hello. There's also, that gap under the door. So when people come up, she waits by the door as they come in for the morning, and she gets lots of pats. I get a lot of comments such as like, oh, I think I need to come in and have a session with you and Lola. She's just so calming. Like a lot of the staff, something will happen and I just get all these comments all the time about, oh, she's so lovely. And, lots of pats and things and people joke about like how she calms them down, but it, like unbeknownst to them, it's genuinely happening for them in their cortisol levels. But I get a lot of comments like that. And the same with Harvey in the primary school. I've got our administration lady at the front desk has treats in her drawer that she gives to Harvey. And so when Harvey comes in the morning, he knows if she's there, he runs exactly and sits and looks up at the drawer that they're in. And she's like, hello, my little darling. And then gives him a little treat. She's hilarious.
So cute.
And that's like a little routine that they've got into with the two of them, where he comes and she's got her little liver treats in her admin desk and gives him one of those.
So what happens when you walk in there without him?
People ask me. Usually it's a good morning and then it's a where's Harvey, or is today not a Harvey day?
Yeah.
That's one of the first questions I'll get is about the dog.
And that admin lady, like, would she say something if he's not there?
Yes, yeah. Most people would. Not everyone, like not, because they're used to him not being there sometimes. Yeah. But definitely, I definitely get asked about where he is, is today not his day, like. He
has a significant enough impact on the staff when he is there that they notice it and feel it and comment on it when he's not there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say so. Yeah.
Yep. That's pretty consistent with what we hear across the board, and it's pretty special. Lots of teams come back and tell us that like the impact on the staff has been huge. Like the impact on the kids is great, the impact on the school as a whole is great. But the impact on the staff is really big. One of the things that, it's awesome and it's exciting and you're doing a great job and all those things. But I always do come back to, so this is why, we put so much work into these dogs so that when you do get them in the school, that we recognize and understand that people are forming relationships with them. Like that lady that's giving him a treat every morning, she has a relationship with that dog. And I'm just thinking about, teams that we've got that they're already in workplaces or already in schools, and they either have had to remove the dog because they've bitten someone, or they're barking at people, or things like that are happening. Or we fail them. They do the course and then we fail them because we've assessed that the temperament's not right for the job. And then people are having to remove them from those communities. So whether it's a school community or, any workplace where you've got staff and people interacting with the dogs and stuff like that, it's a loss. It is a loss. Like imagine how your schools would react, Amy, if for some reason, the dogs could never come in again, or they had to have 6 months off for retraining, or they had to whatever. Do you think that would have a significant impact on your school communities?
Absolutely. I think it definitely would. I don't really like to imagine not there being a time where I had to go in and they couldn't be there. Because I think that would be a lot of people would be worried or sad or confused by the situation and what has happened. But ultimately, I think it would have an impact on everyone, given that they have made an impact since they've been there. Yeah. And people do build relationships with the dogs, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, I love hearing about it. And I just know that, because I know the dogs as well, but I just know that's so special. Like for that, I'm just picking on that one example, but if you've got treats in your drawer and, you're so happy to see him every day, and then he's, if the days he's not there, you're like, oh, where is he today? But he's coming back, Yeah. And I've got dogs registered for courses at the moment that, that are in these places still. is still happening, when they shouldn't be, yet, just in case it's not right. Like, we don't know yet because we don't know the teams, but it makes me happy, the great benefit and the way that people build the relationships with the dogs. That's what it's all about, is just exactly stories like that. Like, it's so awesome. All the stuff you're doing, like, it's so cool. I just want to make sure that we're not rupturing those relationships and things by then having dogs, fail their assessments and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yep. And I get a bit of a bee in my bonnet as well after being in the industry for such a long time and seeing it grow, and it's fantastic. But it upsets and frustrates me when you see people that are unintentionally maybe doing things that aren't the best way or to go about things.
Yeah.
Or intentionally in some cases. They don't understand it, and so it's not important to them, because it really has a chance to ruin it for a lot of people.
It really
Like,
does.
it damages, when things that can go wrong do go wrong. It's a lot of people that get impacted, but also, the people that are doing the right thing, all of the teams that are out there doing well for the industry and representing in a really professional, positive light. It creates a bad image for us, for everyone. The amount of effort that I put into introducing the dogs correctly into that school environment, and the effort that I've gone to continue having that professional approach. You don't want to be painted with the same brush as anyone doing maybe something not quite right or unethical, or so
that's it. That's why we want to talk about it and, keep talking about it and sharing information and things like that, because we do want to see people doing the industry proud. And, we've invested, geez, you and I by now, like tens of thousands of dollars in these dogs that we've got,
cheap.
like, you've got golden retrievers. They're not cheap these days.
Yeah.
My dogs are, weren't too pricey, but I've invested so much time and money into them, like, huge amounts.
They've got the best of everything. They premium
work,
everything.
so they get paid, like, they're on the best diets. They get, they're all the best everything. Yeah, like, absolutely. They want for nothing, and so, when you think about, so Sonny he's 11 and a half, he's only semi-retired. He's still working from home. Like, he's had such an amazing career. I've got photos of him up. He doesn't go into the clinic anymore because it's a bit of a long drive for him now. But when I work from home, I go to home clinic. So when I work from home, he sees clients here. And I've got photos of him up at my psychology practice down in Redcliffe. And my kids always ask about him. Like, how's Sonny? How's Sonny going? How's Sonny? I'm like, he's great. He's going so good. He's like, semi-retired life, da-da-da. But that's a dog, like, he hasn't been, I don't know how long, he's probably been, I took him in once, actually, not that long ago, for some reason. But apart from that, he hasn't been there for like 2 years. Like,
I would say it's at least 2 years.
Because Nala's 3.
More.
So I think I paired them up until she was 12 months. And then I think that's when she took over his clients. So, like, and that's those kids that know him from,
way back.
7.5 years or something, the practice has been open. So, since he was 4, kids have known him. And so to have, that's a dog that's been exited in a really soft way too. Like, they knew. So the kids knew because Nala was teamed up with Sonny. So he trained her on the job. And so they all knew, and he was 8 at the time, and they all knew I was progression planning so that when he was 9, he could semi-retire, I didn't want to wait until he was 10, just in case I don't know how he was going to age. But he's great. Like, he's doing really well. So but you just never know. He's a Labrador, so you don't really know. And I was like, I really didn't want him to have like a cognitive decline. You hear dogs getting dementia and stuff, they get confused and that. I just didn't want to wait until that was happening to move him, cut him back, But he's going pretty good. So even though like that took 12 months of the kids, you know, seeing him, you know, he's training up Nala and, you know, all this stuff. He was exited in a really nice way, and the photos are on the wall, and he's still at home, and, you know, he's still, you know, clients still seeing him, stuff like that. But even that, like, it's still been so meaningful, like that people still ask about him all the time. I can only imagine how you'd be handling those conversations if, let's say, for example, I left it until he was 10 before I bought his replacement, so therefore was working him until he was 11, at which point he would have been he's 11 and a half now, but he would have been tired, grumpy. I don't know if he would have had cognitive decline. Let's pretend that he had, you know, some dementia and bit someone, or, you know, started growling at kids, or, you know, something like that, and I had to remove him for that reason. Like, I just don't even, I would hate to have that conversation every time someone asked about Sonny and be like, oh, he bit someone, so now he can't be a therapy dog anymore, you know? Like, I just don't even know how I would handle that. And I think it would be such a shame to his career and his legacy and things like that if I had let it get to that point, which is why I bought Nala when he was 8, who's also a Labrador. So the point I'm sort of making there is, like, these relationships that people have with the dogs, they are meaningful, and they will ask about the dogs and things like that. So I guess it's just helping people, if you're new to the industry, if you're listening to this and you're sort of just like getting a feel for it, or you're thinking about getting into it or something like that. I guess that message is always just about understanding, get some training, and do some reading, keep listening to the podcast and things like that, because it is a thing. It is really a thing, and people build relationships with the animals, and our job as the handler is to facilitate that relationship so that it's healthy, which means preventing it from getting into a space where it becomes unhealthy, either for the humans or the dogs that are involved. And I guess really the only way to do that is to be well informed, and, you know, having discussions with other industry professionals and things like that, and really, really advocating for our dogs and making sure, like Amy's done, you know, like Lola is better suited for the high school, so put her in the high school, you know, making great decisions like that for your dogs. Or, you know, I'm only going to be doing whatever today at the school, so I'm not bringing the dog, so, you know, they're having another day off. Like, those kinds of decisions are really, really great decisions, and they're decisions that you can't make if you're not informed, and you're not aware of advocating for your dog, and you're not aware of, you know, the relationships that they have with the kids, staff, school community, things like that. I just think that's very important.
Absolutely.
All right, Miss Amy. Thanks for chatting with me.
Thank you. It's a good chat.
Thanks for the catch-ups, mate.
Good to talk about this stuff, isn't it?
It's fantastic to talk about this stuff. And I got a little bit sidetracked, but that's okay. We've got you know, lots of more conversations that we can have, but also really loved hearing about what you're doing at the school, bud.
Yeah.
They're very lucky to have you.
Good. Thank you.
Will you come back and talk to me about stuff again?
Yes. Great. Definitely. We can pick some other things and have a chat. It sounds good.
All right. Thanks, Amy, and we will talk to you again.
Excellent. Thanks, Sam.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you're interested in studying with Therapy Dogs Australia, or you have a few more questions before deciding, please get in touch with us by emailing courses@therapydog.com.au or visiting our website at www.therapydog.com.au for more information and FAQs.